And now it's time for A Geek Speak with
GK Technologies,
Sarah and Jody.
In the fields again, I just can't wait to get in the fields again. The life I love is spreading potash for my friends, and I can't wait to get in the fields again. No, I can't wait to get in the fields again.
We are very excited on this week's A Geek Speak to have the great Paul Fuller, drainage expert extraordinaire, GK Technology, joining us to visit about all things drainage-wise in the world of GK Technology and just precision agriculture and drainage on a whole. So this is going to be a really fun and exciting conversation. So let's just kick it off. How did you get your start in precision agriculture and GK Technology and just agriculture on a whole?
So I was born and raised on a small, I shouldn't say small, at the time it was probably a decent sized farm. Grew up on a highly diversified farm. There was 5 families. My dad and 4 of his brothers all farmed together. And there's 13 of my generation that worked through the operation over time too. But we were diversified, had corn, wheat, soybeans, oats, rye, flax. I still remember swimming in a bin of flax. If you've never done it, I would encourage it. It's just about like swimming in water. You guys up north actually might be able to find some flax to do that. But we also had cattle, sheep, pigs, chickens, and we milked a cow. Morning and night, the cow got milked. Milk got carried into grandma's basement, poured through the separator, and the old international round top refrigerator that was down in the basement. The cream got put in the 1 pound coffee cans. Milk got put in the 3 pound coffee cans, and that's how we got our dairy. So I think as far as getting into ag drainage, as a kid, I love draining mud puddles. I mean, there's nothing more fun than going after a rain, and our yard was never exactly perfectly manicured. And with your foot or a stick making little ditches. So I think that's where I got my start in ag drainage. Spent most of my career in agriculture. I went to SDSU. I was going to be an ag teacher. And I decided that I'm not the best student in the world, but I enjoyed college. From there, I ended up going to work actually at a tire retailer, and my first taste of running a farm tire service truck and out fixing tractor tires and combine tires. Did that for a year in Brookings, and then I got an offer to come back home and do the same thing at the local co-op. So I believe it was 13 years there of doing that. I still have some of those customers today, and that was early 90s. And I still do drainage work, tile design, some of that for some of the same customers today. So kind of getting into precision agriculture. So I left the co-op, and I can thank my wonderful wife for that. She ran an online business. I'd kind of gotten beat up a little bit at work after a tractor tire explosion. Had a surgery from that and a fractured sternum and some other stuff. And my wife said, "Why don't you come and work for me?" So we had an online business, or she did, and I came to work for her, and I sold bath and body products and home fragrance, candles, reed diffusers, that type of stuff for a couple of years. And so kind of a real change of pace right there.
I didn't know you were into selling Bath and Body Works and candles and fragrances. This is a
You
whole
bet.
side of Paul. I had no idea.
Yeah, there's a lot of you don't know about me. But after doing that for a couple of years, I decided to get back into agriculture, and I went to work for a short line implement dealership, and I drove truck part time. I built augers, I built strip till machines, I did a little of everything. And my boss basically he says, "I know you like technology. We're getting a lot of interest in sprayer controls, section control, that type of stuff. What do you think of it? You want to start, kind of start our precision ag GPS department?" And I said, "I think I'd really enjoy that." So that was in 2009. I started the precision ag department at Westside Implement. In summer of 2009, had 2 people stop in my office that said, "What do you know about tile plows?" And I said, absolutely nothing. Should I know? And they said, you need to learn this because we're buying them from you. So that was kind of the start of it. So basically 2010s when I really started going with the drainage stuff. And I believe I met Kelly Sharp. I can't remember if it was 2010 or 2011. I think it wasn't until 2011 that I met Kelly and started selling Ag Data Viewer at the time, just on the drainage side. I knew nothing about the agronomy side. I still remember the first training class that I sat through in Watertown, South Dakota. And about noon on the first day, I was like, I don't know if this is for me. My head was kind of blown. You've all been to a first training class at some point, and you understand, don't you?
It totally rings home to me, Paul. I remember the first time I did training class with Kelly, and I thought, oh my Lord, there's no way I can figure this out. And yet you can.
And we were going through downloading imagery. I still remember that, using Glovis to download Landsat imagery and stuff. And we don't cover any of that stuff in class anymore because we've got a lot better other things to cover. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, so that kind of got me introduced to GK, and I continued to sell drainage software.
Question for you, Paul. So you were selling Ag Data Viewer at the time. Were you basically a reseller at that time then?
Yes, I was a dealer. Yep, I was a
Okay.
dealer for them. Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's kind of got my introduction to them and tile design. And I still remember after that first class, about once a month, I would literally pick a random field and go through, bring in LiDAR imagery or LiDAR elevation stuff, look at some imagery, and just kind of do some rough tile layout just to keep myself on top of it because you forget it. It's so easy to forget stuff if you don't use it somewhat regular.
And I think that's a really important point to bring up, that idea of you just got to log the hours behind the computer and practice, because the more that you practice, the easier it is to remember how to do it. I don't know about you, Paul, but right now I'm getting a lot of phone calls from guys that are trying to remember how to do everything as they're moving into the spring season and writing prescriptions and or starting to think about how to make the water flow again, right? And it's just to review how to do it all.
Yep. Because if we haven't you done it for 4 months or 8 months, or like a lot of my farm software users, they write prescriptions this time of year and they write them in 2 or 3 weeks and they don't touch the software again until next spring. Other than maybe soil sampling or something like that. And that little bit of refresher course for yourself here and there definitely helps.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you were reselling software, and so you met Kelly Sharp, and so you were kind of dabbling with making just a couple, rough cut drain tile plans here and there. And so then what happened?
From there, my boss at the time would not let me do custom tile design. He was worried about liability. And so there was kind of a part of me that I don't feel wasn't getting used because I thought I had the skills. I'd attended numerous drainage design classes. I recommend that to anybody. I think I've been to 18 or 19 of them now over the years. Some were the same class, just different sessions of it, or different years, different locations. And but I learned a lot from those people that are smarter than me, and we all need to know somebody who knows something we don't know. And learning from them really got me fired up about doing drainage design stuff. So from there, I talked to Kelly Sharp. It's been summer of 2015, and I said, I see you've got an advertisement on your website for a sales rep. And Kelly said, yeah. He says, we do, but I won't hire you for it. So that was kind of my start of working for GK. But I will add to that. He says, but I have a different idea for you. He says, I got to talk it over with Darren though. And at that time was kind of at the beginning of SD Drain. And he says, we got SD Drain ditch out. It's working pretty good. Now that came out spring of 15, so it hadn't been out very long. And he says, we're starting to work on our tile plow software.
Paul, I gotta stop you there for a second, because there might be some people that don't know what SD drain or SD tile is. So can you just explain What is that?
So SD Drain is a joint venture company, half owned by GK Technology, half owned by Russ Sales, and we are a GPS grade control company. Um, there's actually no one employed by SD Drain. It's just the people from our side, people from Russ Sales side, both do work for them. It is the leading, not in sales necessarily, as far as in functionality. It's the leading GPS grade control system out there, just due to some of the functions it has, some stuff that nobody else has. I've been working with it now since I started working with them. I started helping develop the tile side, not so much on the programming side because you don't want me programming it. But we have a wonderful, really brilliant programmer that does the programming on it, and but I communicate to him in layman terms. I want this to do this. Sometimes trying to get that from layman terms into Travis terms is a little bit tough sometimes. But once we finally figure out the right terminology, it's awesome. Travis can get that into code and make that work.
And
So
Travis is really the computer programmer that nobody gets to see, but everybody gets to see his work. He's always in the background making everything kind of work with that. Him and Darren together are the programmers behind all of that. But that's really fascinating, Paul. You were really in with SD Drain at the very beginning of when that came out. So you were really boots on the ground working with those software packages for this company almost at the inception of when they came out. Is that correct?
Well, I actually sold it when I was a dealer for under Russ Sales. I actually sold SD Drain packages that summer of 15. I didn't sell it spring of 15. I wasn't quite ready to start taking on a new project at that point. Although the spring drainage in my area is pretty slim anyway. So by the time I got to where I was really going to push it, I went to work for the company instead.
That's pretty neat. So you've just done a lot of things in your career, and before you've gotten to working for GK Technology, that's a pretty robust and interesting history. So since then, really what you've been doing with drainage within GK Technology, and collaborating with SD Drain and Russ Sales, tell us a little bit about that, because you have really seen this whole drainage software thing with GK Technology take off and grow into what it has become today.
Yeah, at the beginning, it was, well, what's SD Drain? I'd have my literature at a farm show, or be talking to people, what's SD Drain? And is it South Dakota Drain? No, it's Super Duper Drain. That was kind of the inside joke at the beginning before I started, but it's actual simple dynamic drainage. So yeah, so from the beginning, trying to get a new product out there that nobody had heard of. Um, I started kind of with my existing customers that were running a different grade control system that I had sold them. They trusted me to buy that and to keep them up and going, and started slowly rolling some of those over to SD Drain to kind of get it started. And I kind of had free range to start out with. I could sell it clear across the country. However, support is important. Any software out there, whatever it is, if you can't get it supported, unless it's I can do 2 clicks and that's all it does, and that's all I need it to do, there's very few competent packages out there that can do that. The one click shopping is probably not the best for what most people want. So most things take a little work, and once you figure them out and use them, something that works well for you is what you're looking for. And so that was kind of how I got SD Drain started being sold in my area. Originally, I was basically covering South Dakota, southern Minnesota. I mean, I have systems all across the country from well, I've got one on the Pacific Ocean that we found a bug in SD Drain when we were setting him up remotely. He's in Washington State, and he was 3 feet below sea level. And we found a bug in SD Drain because it was programmed in there that if it shows up below sea level elevations, boot it out because it's bad. Well, so the theory was good until you get below sea level, and they weren't actually tiling below sea level, but their yard sits below sea level. There, there's the Columbia River, a big dike, and then their farm. And so found a little bug there with that. We shook our heads for a while. Finally, got Travis promoted in, and Travis says, "Oh, I programmed it to disregard anything below sea level." So we figured out a temporary fix, and then the next version of SD Drain had a fix in there, so it didn't disregard it. So, but yeah, I did my first true remote setup during COVID. Towards the beginning part of COVID, we really didn't know what was going on with this. How bad a thing is this? Should I even leave my house?
Right.
Or should I go about life as normal? And I'll give my wife credit for this one. She actually said, "Hey, instead of driving 7 hours into Iowa, why don't you try to do it remotely? I hear you remote support customers all the time." And so I asked the customer about it. I said, "You got a good hotspot?" He says, "Yep, I got good cell signal." He said, "Let's try this. 1 o'clock tomorrow, I'll remote in. If it's not going by 4 o'clock, I'll hit the road and we'll get it going the next morning in person." And I never went to that place in Iowa. So that was kind of the beginning of the remote, total remote installation and stuff too. I've done numerous other ones across the country now too, because it's, why drive if you don't have to?
And to that point, too, one of the things that I think is really interesting about the work that you do with GK is all of the different places that you've had a chance to work in the United States. You've done a lot of work with water in a lot of different places. So, just out of curiosity, what are some of the different places where you've worked, and what are some of the different things that you've done with drainage and water management?
So yeah, everything drainage is kind of my drainage or water management is what I do. So a Lee Greenwood song came to mind last night as I was thinking about this particular part of it. From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee. Um, and I actually had to look up the lyrics for it last night, but I'm not going to sing it for you. Basically, I actually kind of did a little looking last night, and I have done drainage projects in 24 states.
Wow. Holy
Um,
Hannah.
and the Northeast, I have done very, very little. The Southeast, I haven't done much, and then we'll call it the dry Western states that just there's not much drainage going on there. But I do have customers in California, Oregon, and Washington, so I got the Pacific Ocean covered, clear to the Carolinas, and a lot in South Dakota, North Dakota, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, Indiana, Ohio, Illinois. Your corn producing areas, we'll call it, is where I've done most of my stuff. But I've done some down in Oklahoma and Kansas also. So cover a pretty good area. And unfortunately, I rarely get to visit a job site where I actually did a design. So that's something that I actually kind of miss out on. But with doing SD Drain, but that's more of a little bit of a more local level, I do end up with some of the job sites that I design. So, and here and there, I probably spend more time there than I should. But it's like, hey, I love running tile plows. And so, yeah, you're 3 miles from my house. I won't email you this information. I'll just drive out and drop it in your computer, and then I might spend 2 or 3 hours, helping run their tile plow. So I do everything with the backhoe. That's something I'm not very good at is running a backhoe or excavator.
And it's always great to get out to the field, right? And just actually be there and ground truth all the stuff that we're seeing on the screen. It's really fun.
So when folks are using SD Drain, what are they typically doing with it? What are the applications that folks are buying this software for and this controller for?
So there's two different systems. We got SD Drain Ditch and SD Drain Tile. Ditch is obviously designed for surface drainage. Red River Valley, where the company is based out of, surface drainage is still king. If you don't have good surface drainage, you probably going to have problems. Locally, where I'm at, where I kind of cut my teeth, there's very little surface drainage that goes on. There's much, much more now. But I do promote that, surface drainage is still probably the most important thing you can do for your farm. It doesn't fix everything, but it sure helps. Then we get into the tile side of things. And the tile side of things is what now manages our water table. But you got to get rid of your surface water before you can manage your water table. That's one of the biggest mistakes that people make is, well, I've got this pothole that holds 8 inches of water on a heavy rain, and they tile it and they still have problems. Trying to soak water through 32, 36, 40 inches of, some nice black dirt on nice black soil
Thank
on
you.
top, down into some nasty yellow clay or blue-gray clay that water just does not permeate through very fast. So getting that surface water out of the way is a big step.
So, and I think that brings up a really important point because I've had conversations with customers about that as well. That whole idea that, oh, I'm going to drain tile and it's going to fix everything. Um, I'm not so sure if I agree with that drain tile being 100% of the solution because if your surface drainage isn't functioning right, your drain tile is not going to fix that. And I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just beating a dead horse now, Paul, but I don't know what else you would want to think about that or how you would want to add to that or subtract or correct me if I'm wrong.
No, you're not wrong at all. Surface drainage is one of the most effective, probably cost-effective things you can do. It does take some equipment, but you can use a box scraper, you can use a 6-way blade, you can use a rotary ditcher, you can use a scraper, you can use a skid steer bucket for that matter, just to get that surface water gone first. And that's your first step. Have a lot of discussions with people, where they get wetland determinations back, and they have something called an FW, and it is a previously altered wetland, pre 1985, according to the farm program. But the problem is it started to revert back, and it no longer is drained. Now it's basically reverting back to original shape. You know how that happens? A foot of silt in the ditch bottom. And now all of a sudden we got a foot of water that can get held back. And I run into it on my own farm. I went out and helped Dad on a drainage project where they'd come in with a big scraper in the late 60s and cut about a 4.5, 5 foot deep trench to drain some spots. And that's the last piece of iron that had ever been through that ditch. And so that we fixed that, and now all of a sudden we've got a couple acres that no longer have a drainage issue.
So you mentioned earlier that you're seeing a lot more people work on surface drainage versus before. Why do you think that there used to be and maybe still is a push to focus on tile versus surface drainage? Is it just too difficult? Like what's kind of the thought process that goes into that?
I think a lot of it is promotion. And so there's a certain TV agricultural show that really promoted drainage, and they promoted tile. And tile's a great thing. Tile that they kind of helped get my start into agricultural drainage, but they promote tile, 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 tile. They never ever mention surface drainage. And so when you hear something, hey, somebody that's respected or not, basically saying that, hey, you need to tile. Well, we do need to tile, but how do we tile effectively? And we can't tile effectively without getting rid of surface water first.
Well, and one of the things that I think is interesting about surface drainage and when we're mapping out, we've got in our software the way that we can do watershed modeling, right? And it's interesting because I I like to call our surface drainage maps cocaine for farmers because it's very addictive. And you laugh, but you know it's true, right? You make a
Yeah.
guy one map for a field and they're like, "Holy buckets, this is amazing." And then they want to see more because it's really describing, where the potholes are, where the water ponds, where the water wants to flow naturally. And it's amazing when the farmers can actually see that according to the elevation. And so I think once those data are available to help farmers really think about where that water needs to go, it does open their eyes to the possibility of some things that can be done with surface drainage that maybe they didn't think about before. And I know you've done a lot more with surface drainage than I ever have. So I don't know if you've got some thoughts on that or anything else.
Yeah. So the process of designing tile, we have to get a surface drainage map made first. and we need to know where water goes. So that our surface drainage maps show you where all your depressions are, where the water should go. It's kind of interesting how I see a field here and there where somebody has just literally totally screwed up a field doing drainage. And historically, I'm not going to say it was the current operator, but the guys that have the little, we'll call them the little 3-point hurricane ditchers, the little spinners that, the mud puddle drainers basically, and they go out into a field and they try to drain things. And I can see those in the elevation maps, the LiDAR that I use. And they don't know where water's going, and they have little ditches running everywhere. And what they need to do is go out with a land plane and level the darn field off first, level off all those little ditches, and then start over. Is really what they should probably do, because when we're leading from point A to point C to point D and never getting to the outlet, but we're just moving water around within a field and never getting rid of it, doesn't do you much good. So I see that here and there on fields that I do for customers, and having a plan is key, and knowing where water should go. Now, you might take it some way different because of a neighbor, and quite frequently I get customers say, "Hey, I know this should go across that neighbor. I can't work with him. Can we go here instead?" So cool thing with the ADMS, we can draw a ditch in there and say, yes, you can. And it's going to be 27,000 yards of dirt. Do you really want to move 27,000 yards of dirt to drain that 1/4 of an acre wet spot? Yes or no? So that's the nice thing about planning too, is we can kind of figure out some of those things, alternative plans. If the right way won't work because of whatever reason, let's figure out plan B, and then we can decide if plan B is worth doing it.
So this is a really good place to stop the first part of our conversation with Paul. We've talked a lot about Paul's background, how he got into drainage, and things to really think about when you're starting to think about draining or working on water for your own fields. We're going to come back next week and continue this conversation for part 2, really digging deep about what makes a good tile plan and what makes a good drainage plan and how we can actually get that done. And of course, along the way, Paul will share his knowledge about what are the things we should look for when we're doing that. So thank you so much for joining us this week. We'll see you next week. And remember that with GK, we have a map
and an app
for that.
No, I can't wait to get in the fields again.
Let the geeks at GK Technology help you with your agricultural data. Their agronomists know agriculture. When it comes to creating soils and zone maps to maximize yields in your fields, you can trust the people with decades of experience in site-specific agriculture. Everyone at GK Technology has a background in agriculture, so they know what makes a farm run, and they speak your language. The geeks at GK Technology have a map and an app for that.